Alright, what's up guys? My name is Zach, and today I am driving a 2013 Ford Escape SEL. Up front is a 1.6 liter turbocharged inline-4, and down below is a 6-speed automatic transmission. Now, I am super excited to be driving this Ford Escape for two reasons. First of all, I filmed the facelift of the 3rd gen Escape before. This was a 2017 titanium, had all the bells and whistles. This is a more average SEL and pre-facelift, so I'm excited to get into that. But also, this particular vehicle has 212,000 miles on it, and I don't think that Ford from this era is really associated with the word reliable. So today we're going to be talking about how this vehicle got to 212,000 miles and what has gone wrong over that time period. But if you would like to submit your own vehicle and have it reviewed here on the channel, you can head on over to my website, zackpradel.com/submit. It's a quick and easy submission form. It takes under a minute to fill out, and I come out to you. And if you'd like to see all my videos weeks or sometimes months in advance, you can head on over to my Patreon for only $5 a month. But let's get back to that 1.6 liter turbo under the hood. Well, that is essentially a Ford Fiesta ST engine. If you remember those from back in the day, I always loved the little fists. So people call them Fiesta STs. They shortened it to fist, which I don't love the shortening, but I love driving those. Those were great little cars. And this Escape came with 3 engine options. They had this. They also had a 2-liter turbo, as well as a 2.5-liter NA engine. That was the base engine. The power here is fine. It does leave a little bit to be desired. However, again, they did have that 2-liter turbo. The transmission definitely doesn't help, and we'll talk about that in a second. 1.6T, it's fine. It does the job. Is this a sporty engine? Is this a sporty car? No, this was meant from point A to point B, and I think it did that job relatively well. Like I said, paired to it is a 6-speed automatic. It's not great. It's pretty lazy, and these were pretty problematic transmissions as well. Any transmission, almost any transmission from this era of Ford is no good. I wouldn't wish a 2013 Ford Focus base model on any of my worst enemies. And believe me, I have several. The Escapes I've seen online also have had these issues. However, this is at 212,000 miles, and it is on the original transmission. Now, a lot of these miles are highway, so you can factor that in for sure, but it just goes to show you it is somewhat capable of holding itself together, and I like to see that. Last but not least, this particular SEL is all-wheel drive. However, you could find Escapes in the era in front wheel. So how does it feel to drive the Escape SEL? It's fine. A little bit harder of a ride than what you might expect out of a vehicle from this size. Visibility's okay. Throttle isn't really there, but again, I chalk that mostly up to the 6-speed and not necessarily the 1.6. It's a rather bland and forgettable driving experience. However, that's kind of a good thing when it comes to these cars. Sometimes you don't want them to be overly in your face. You just need reliable transportation, and this has been reliable transportation for the last 212,000 miles. Albeit the only issue has been a fuel pump has gone out and needed to be changed. Pretty typical of Ford and Mazdas of this era, but that's the only running issue. With that stuff out of the way, let's talk about the interior. Well, in front of me, I have 4 gauges and a screen. Off to the left is my tachometer, in the center is the fuel and coolant temperature, and off to the right is the speedometer. I do get that little information gauge up in the center. You could switch it around. Ford, from really like 2008, 2009 onward, has always been pretty good about giving their drivers and buyers a good amount of information, so I definitely like to see that. Speaking of Ford treating their customers right, look at that Falcon, baby. Beautiful, beautiful Falcon. Love to see that. On the steering wheel on the left, we do have our selectors for that gauge cluster screen, as well as our cruise control, and off to the right, we have volume, skip track, home, and phone options. Off to the left, we do have a very complex looking climate vent. We also have our headlight switch, gauge dimmer switch, and fog light switch. Moving on to the door, we have lock and unlock. We have 3 levels of memory seats. Definitely very nice to see that. And then we have power mirrors and power windows. Moving into the center, we do have our sync powered by Microsoft badge just below the CD player. And we have our infotainment display. This actually feels relatively modern considering the fact that this is over 12 years old. I can't really blame it too much. Any infotainment system is usually outdated by 5 years after the car, so this is already doing great for what it is. However, my one complaint is that it does not have a backup camera. Would have liked to have seen that, although they weren't legally required for another 5 years. Down below that, we have some physical buttons for that infotainment display, tune, volume, source, things like that. And then we also have our climate controls. We do get dual zone climate. Very, very nice to see that back in 2013. We have a nice readout with that as well. Rear defrost, and we have the shifter. The shifter is pretty nondescript. You can plus minus on the side of it if you would like. 12-volt outlet and heated seats down below, and then we do have our cup holders, so we will do a big freaking bottle test here in the Ford Escape from 2013. And although it fails, I know it does have this liner. Potentially you could remove that. I could not remove it easily, and I don't want to break anything. So unfortunately, at least for now, the Ford Escape SEL fails the big friggin' bottle test. Then we do get a center console with some video inputs in it. Very interesting to see that. And then we have the seats. Seats are heated, memory. They're comfortable enough. I wouldn't say that they're the most comfortable seats I've ever sat in. But again, just like the driving experience, it works. It works really well. The Escape has always just kind of worked well and not made a huge splash. So the seats definitely reflect that feeling as well. However, speaking of seats, we do have back seats. So let's go do a back seat review. All right, we're in the back of the Ford Escape 2013 SEL, said that all out of order. And a couple of things to note. First of all, knee room good, headroom good. My knees are coming very close to hitting the seat, but they're not hitting the seat. I'm 5'11", not a small guy, and I fit back here pretty well. This was a big advantage that the Escape had over the Ford Focus of the same era. Down below, we do get climate vents, which I am soaking up here on this hot, hot day. We also have a 12-volt outlet, and we do have a center console with 2 cup holders found in there. Again, comparing this to the Ford Focus of the era, which I also have a 2013 Ford Focus review on the channel that I'll link at the end of this one. This is a lot easier to get in and out of. It has a lot more space, and they were priced somewhat competitively. So this kind of took over for the Focus when it went out of production. Let's hop into the very back. We'll take a quick look at the trunk and cargo space, and then we'll talk about the looks. Right around back of the Escape SEL. Pull the trunk up here. And there you go. Nothing too crazy around the back here. You do get slots for privacy covers and whatnot, and you could pull this up and you do have a spare tire, which is definitely very nice to see. But overall, nothing too crazy. It's the back of an Escape. But there you go. Again, this was a lot more space than like what the Ford Focus had of the era, so this was another huge selling point for the Escape. Now we gotta talk about the looks, and I've never overly loved the look of this. I say never. Very, very early on, I got my driver's license in 2013, and my mom had a Chrysler Pacifica, actually still does, a green turd of a car, and she got hit in it, so she needs some body work done, so the rental company actually gave us a brand new, at the time, 2013 Ford Escape. And so this was one of the first new cars I had ever driven because I had just gotten my license like a month earlier. So if these are old Instagram posts from 2013 for me, look at the horrible filter. I did think that it was really cool looking then. Since then, they're fine. They don't really move me. I'm not sure I would hang this up in my art gallery, but it was a means to an end. And so that is really, really nice to see. With all of that being said, let's get on to my final thoughts. What do I think driving a 2013 Ford Escape SEL? Well, I really enjoy this car. I'm happily surprised, probably just as surprised as you are, to see the fact that it's gone 212,000 miles. I've always thought of Ford in this era as kind of a chew up and spit out kind of company. They weren't super reliable. The plastics in here definitely aren't very premium feeling. And I think Ford was going through some growing pains in this era as well. Post-recession, they were very proud that they didn't take a bailout from the government, which is great. Love that. But that doesn't mean they weren't suffering from the same money problems that GM was across the table. And so you could see where they cut some corners, and the transmissions from this era, as I mentioned, definitely weren't great. This isn't the most refined vehicle I've ever driven. And I think the modern Ford Escape is a better product, but then again, it's a decade later. Ford has kind of fixed their money problems, at least for the time being, so that certainly makes sense. I am staggered by the fact that this hasn't needed any major work besides a fuel pump, which, let's be honest, fuel pump isn't the worst thing in the world. Sure, it could leave you stranded, but it's also not an engine-out replacement, so that's definitely nice to see. And now the Escape is on the brink of getting canceled. It might already have been canceled, I don't know. The Ford Bronco Sport kind of fills this lane really, really well while being more fun and more sporty. But the Escape throughout its run has always had one goal: to get people where they need to go. It wasn't much more than that. The very, very early ones did have some off-road chops, but this was just a people mover. It's easier to get in and out of than the Focus, has a little bit more space than the Focus, and was offered for not that much more expensive than the Focus. So people flocked to these in droves. And honestly, there's nothing really to hate about them. There's nothing to really overly love about this car, but there's nothing to hate about it. And so in your day-to-day, this was owned by a crane operator. He had to drive hundreds of miles a week. This did it for him. It worked for him. It got him to the job site, and now his son drives it, and it gets his son to his job, school, things like that. It works. It's functional, and that's what I love about these Escapes. Will I sing the Ford Escape a lullaby as it finally goes out of production? Probably not, but at the very least, it deserves a going away party and maybe a nice slice of cookie cake. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Huge thank you to Danny for letting me borrow his Ford Escape for today's video. Always good to get back behind the wheel of one of these. Danny has been absolutely wonderful to work with. I also filmed his Ford Crown Victoria. That was a road operations vehicle that would paint the lines on the road, so that was really, really cool and special. So I appreciate him supporting the channel by giving me cars to review. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to rate the video, comment on the video, and subscribe if you really liked it. Take care, guys.